What if I told you that the biggest obstacle in your life is not your circumstances, not your past, not the people around you, but a program running in your own brain that you never chose? Every day that program decides how confident you feel, how hard you push, and how far you go. And most people never even realize it exists. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they run the same mental patterns every single day, the same thoughts, the same emotional reactions, the same excuses. And here's the truth. Your brain is not fixed. It's programmable. The moment you understand this, your life changes forever. Success is not an event. It's a mental environment you create. If you want different results, you must build a different inner world. When you rewire your brain, you rewire your destiny. Most people are not living their own lives. They are living on autopilot. Their thoughts repeat the same patterns every day. Their reactions are predictable, and their decisions are driven by habits formed years ago. They believe they are choosing, but in reality, they are reacting. This is where awareness becomes the greatest power you will ever develop. Until you become aware of how your mind operates, your brain will continue to run old programs that no longer serve you. Every belief you hold started as a thought you accepted without questioning. Over time, those thoughts became emotional responses, and those responses became habits. Eventually, they formed an identity. The danger is not failure. The danger is unconscious success or unconscious struggle. When you don't know why you do what you do, you cannot change it. Awareness pulls you out of this unconscious loop and places you back in control of your inner world. The moment you slow down and observe your thoughts, something remarkable happens. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one listening to them. That single realization creates space between stimulus and response. In that space lies choice. Instead of reacting with fear, doubt, or anger, you gain the ability to respond with intention. This is where personal power is born, not from force, but from clarity. Most people try to change their lives by changing their circumstances. They chase money, recognition, or approval, hoping that success will finally make them feel confident or fulfilled. But without awareness, new circumstances only trigger old behaviors. A person with an untrained mind can win once and still sabotage themselves again and again. Awareness ensures that growth is sustainable because it addresses the root, not the symptom. When you become aware of your emotional triggers, you stop being controlled by them. You begin to notice patterns when you lose confidence, when you procrastinate, when you give up too early. These moments are not weaknesses, they are signals. They show you exactly where your conditioning lives. Awareness turns mistakes into feedback and pain into information. Instead of judging yourself, you study yourself. This level of awareness does not come from overthinking. It comes from presence. Being present with your thoughts, your body, and your emotions allows you to catch limiting beliefs in real time. You start asking better questions. Why am I feeling this way? Is this belief true? Is this response helping or hurting me? Every question shifts your brain from survival mode into solution mode. As awareness grows, responsibility follows. You stop blaming people, circumstances, or the past, not because they didn't affect you, but because you realize that control always starts inside. Awareness gives you the power to interrupt destructive patterns and replace them with intentional choices. Once you see clearly, you cannot unsee, and that clarity becomes the foundation for lasting success. Your life moves in the direction of what you consistently focus on, whether you realize it or not. The human brain is a goal-seeking machine, and whatever you give your attention to becomes its mission. When your focus is scattered, your energy is scattered. When your focus is controlled, your power multiplies. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because their attention is hijacked by fear, distractions, and untrained thinking. Every moment, your mind is filtering millions of bits of information, but it only lets in what it believes is important. That filter is shaped by your focus. If you constantly focus on problems, your brain becomes highly skilled at finding obstacles. If you focus on opportunity, growth, and solutions, your brain begins searching for ways forward. This is not positive thinking. This is neurological conditioning. Your focus literally trains your brain on what to look for. The quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of the questions you ask yourself. When challenges appear, most people ask, why does this always happen to me? That question forces the brain to find reasons for failure. But when you ask, how can I use this? Or what's the opportunity here? Your brain shifts into problem-solving mode. Focused questions direct mental energy, and directed energy creates momentum. Distraction is one of the greatest enemies of success. Modern life pulls attention in 1,000 directions, training the brain to react instead of create. Every time you allow distraction to control you, you weaken your ability to focus deeply. Over time, this reduces confidence, clarity, and performance. Training focus is like training a muscle. At first, it feels difficult, but with practice, it becomes strength. Those who master focus gain an edge that others never develop. Emotional focus is just as important as mental focus. What you dwell on emotionally becomes your dominant state. If you replay past failures, regret grows stronger. If you consistently focus on gratitude, progress, and growth, confidence expands. Emotions are amplified by repetition, and focus determines what gets repeated. This is why successful people guard their emotional environment so carefully. Your focus also shapes your identity. When you focus on what you lack, you see yourself as incomplete. When you focus on progress, you see yourself as capable. Identity is not fixed. It evolves based on where attention lives. By deliberately focusing on actions within your control, you build certainty and self-trust. Small wins, when focused on, create massive belief. Mastering focus is not about ignoring reality. It's about choosing where your power goes. You can acknowledge problems without living in them. When you decide what deserves your attention, you decide what grows in your life. Control your focus, and you begin to control your outcomes. Human behavior is driven far more by emotion than by logic. You can know exactly what to do, have all the information in the world, and still fail to take action if your emotional state is weak. This is why two people with the same skills can produce completely different results. The difference is not intelligence or talent. It is the emotional state they bring into each moment. When you understand this, you realize that success is less about knowing more and more about feeling differently. Your emotional state determines how you interpret everything that happens to you. In a powerful state, challenges feel like opportunities. In a weak state, the same challenges feel overwhelming. Nothing has changed except your inner condition. Most people wait for the world to give them confidence, motivation, or certainty, but emotion does not work that way. Waiting puts you in a reactive position. Those who perform at a high level learn to generate empowering emotional states on demand. The fastest way to change emotion is through the body. Your posture, breathing, movement, and facial expression send constant signals to the brain. When you collapse your body, your brain reads it as defeat. When you stand tall, breathe deeply, and move with intention, your brain interprets strength and certainty. Emotion is not something that happens to you. It is something you create through physiology. Change the body, and the mind follows. Language also plays a powerful role in emotional control. The words you use internally shape how you feel externally. When you describe a situation as ruined or impossible, your brain responds with stress and shutdown. When you change your language to challenging or figurable, your emotional intensity shifts immediately. Precision in language creates precision in emotion, and precision in emotion creates better decisions. Your emotional state also determines how long you persist. In a strong state, setbacks feel temporary. In a weak state, small obstacles feel permanent. This is why emotional mastery is essential for consistency. Motivation is unreliable when emotion is unmanaged. Discipline grows naturally when emotional states are trained. You stop forcing yourself to act and start aligning yourself to act. Emotions are strengthened through repetition. The more often you experience confidence, gratitude, or certainty, the more natural those states become. The brain builds emotional habits just like behavioral ones. If you repeatedly live in stress or doubt, those states become your default. But if you consciously practice empowering emotions, even when conditions are difficult, your nervous system adapts. High performers do not avoid negative emotions, they manage them. They recognize fear without obeying it and acknowledge stress without becoming it. Emotional control is not suppression, it is direction. When you learn to shift your state under pressure, you gain access to your full capabilities. In those moments, performance stops being inconsistent and starts becoming reliable. Your brain is designed to learn through repetition. It does not respond to what you do once or twice. It responds to what you do consistently. Every thought you think repeatedly strengthens a neural pathway, and every action you repeat teaches your brain what is normal. Over time, these repeated patterns become automatic, requiring little to no conscious effort. This is why habits feel so powerful and at times so difficult to break. Many people believe change requires massive action, but real transformation is built through small, repeated behaviors. A single decision can create a spark, but repetition turns that spark into a permanent shift. When you repeat a behavior, your brain begins to conserve energy by automating it. This is efficient for survival. but it can also trap you in outdated patterns if those behaviors no longer serve your goals. The same process that once protected you can now limit you. Negative habits were not created overnight. They were trained through repetition, often unconsciously. Self-doubt, procrastination, and fear-based reactions are learned responses. The encouraging truth is that anything learned can be unlearned. When you interrupt old patterns and consistently replace them with empowering ones, the brain begins to rewire itself. At first, this feels uncomfortable because the brain resists change. Familiar patterns feel safe, even when they are harmful. Repetition must be intentional to be effective. Repeating negative self-talk only strengthens limitation. Repeating empowering language, visualization, and purposeful action builds confidence and clarity. What you repeatedly say to yourself becomes your internal reality. What you repeatedly do becomes your external results. This is why daily rituals matter more than occasional motivation. Rituals remove the need for willpower by creating structure. Emotion accelerates repetition. When an experience is paired with strong emotion, the brain learns faster. This is why emotionally charged events leave deep impressions. By adding positive emotion to new habits, such as pride, gratitude, or certainty, you strengthen neural connections more rapidly. Celebrating small wins is not trivial. It signals the brain that the behavior is valuable and worth repeating. Consistency eventually creates identity. At first, you act with effort. Then you act with intention. Eventually, you act automatically. This is the point where change becomes effortless because the behavior aligns with who you believe you are. Repetition reshapes not just actions, but self-image. When your brain accepts a new pattern as normal, resistance fades. The key is persistence through discomfort. Early repetition feels unnatural because you are building unfamiliar pathways. But every time you repeat the behavior despite resistance, you weaken the old pattern in strength and the new one. Over time, the struggle disappears, and what once felt forced becomes second nature. This is how lasting change is created, through consistent, intentional repetition that retrains the brain. Every action you take is guided by the way you see yourself. Long before behavior shows up, identity is already in place, silently shaping your choices. If you believe you're disciplined, you act with discipline. If you believe you're unlucky, you hesitate and hold back. This self-image is not something you were born with. It was constructed over time through experiences, feedback, and repetition. Yet once formed, it becomes the invisible force driving nearly every decision you make. Most people try to change behavior without changing identity, and that is why progress rarely lasts. They set goals, create plans, and feel motivated for a short time, but eventually they return to familiar patterns. The brain seeks consistency between identity and action. When behavior conflicts with self-image, the mind pulls you back to what feels familiar. Real change begins when you upgrade the identity that behavior is trying to protect. The language you use to describe yourself reinforces identity at a deep level. Statements like, "I'm just not good at this," or "I've always been this way," may sound harmless, but they act as commands to the brain. The brain's job is to prove you right. When you change your language from limitation to ownership, using words like "I choose," "I'm becoming," or "this is who I am now," your brain begins adjusting behavior to match that declaration. Identity is also shaped by the standards you hold. What you tolerate becomes your baseline. If you tolerate excuses, inconsistency becomes normal. If you raise your standards and decide that certain behaviors are no longer acceptable, identity begins to shift. Standards are not about perfection, they are about commitment. The moment you decide what you stand for, your actions start aligning with that decision. Evidence strengthens identity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you build proof. That proof tells the brain, "This is who I am." Small wins are powerful because they accumulate into belief. When you focus on being consistent instead of being perfect, identity evolves naturally. Confidence grows not from grand achievements, but from repeated alignment between intention and action. Environment also plays a critical role in shaping identity. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, and the expectations around you constantly reinforce who you think you are. If your environment reflects low expectations, it becomes harder to see yourself as capable. When you place yourself in environments that challenge and support growth, identity expands. You begin to act in ways that match the standards around you. Identity change is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about deciding who you will no longer be. When you consciously release an outdated self-image and replace it with a deliberate one, behavior follows effortlessly. Once identity shifts, actions stop feeling forced because they are simply expressions of who you believe you are, Nothing meaningful changes in a person's life until a true decision is made, not a preference, not a wish, and not a hopeful intention, but a decision that removes hesitation and ends internal debate. Most people spend years circling the same goals because they never fully decide. They keep options open, waiting for certainty, comfort, or perfect timing. The mind interprets this hesitation as uncertainty, and uncertainty produces inaction. A real decision sends a clear command to the brain. It says this is happening. When that message is delivered with conviction, the brain immediately begins reorganizing priorities. Attention sharpens. Resources become visible. And solutions that were once invisible start to appear. This is why clarity feels energizing. Decision eliminates mental noise and directs focus toward execution. Many people confuse decision with motivation. Motivation rises and falls, but decision is stable. You can feel tired, uncertain, or afraid and still act when a decision is made. Decision is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to let fear have authority. When you decide, you shift from emotional dependence to personal leadership. You stop asking how you feel and start acting on what you have committed to. Commitment gives decision its power. Without commitment, decisions collapse under pressure. Commitment means deciding in advance that obstacles will not change the outcome. When challenges appear, the brain does not interpret them as stop signs, but as problems to solve. This is where persistence is born. Commitment trains the brain to adapt instead of retreat. Every strong decision also reshapes identity. When you decide and follow through, you send a message to yourself that your word matters. Over time, this builds self-trust. Self-trust is one of the most powerful psychological assets a person can develop. When you trust yourself, confidence becomes natural because it is based on evidence, not emotion. Indecision drains energy. It keeps the mind in constant evaluation, creating stress and fatigue. Decision, even when difficult, creates relief. It simplifies complexity and converts anxiety into movement. This is why decisive individuals often appear calm under pressure. Their energy is not wasted on internal conflict, it is directed toward action. Decision also creates momentum. One decisive action leads to another, and momentum strengthens belief. Progress reinforces commitment, and commitment fuels further PR. Progress. This cycle builds speed and resilience. Even when results are slow, momentum keeps you moving forward. The most powerful decisions are those tied to values rather than outcomes. When decisions are aligned with what truly matters to you, they remain strong even when external rewards are delayed. Values-based decisions anchor behavior and guide long-term success. When you decide with clarity, commitment, and purpose, the brain aligns behind you, and forward movement becomes inevitable. Everything you have heard today leads to one simple truth. Your brain is not your limit. It is your greatest tool. You are not trapped by your past habits, old beliefs, or previous failures. Those were learned patterns, and anything learned can be rewritten. The moment you take control of your awareness, your focus, your emotional state, your repetition, your identity, and your decisions, you stop reacting to life and start directing it. Success is not reserved for a few lucky people. It belongs to those who train their inner world before trying to conquer the outer one. When you change how you think, how you feel, and how you decide, your actions naturally follow. And when your actions change, results have no choice but to change as well. Remember this, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall or rise to the level of your mental conditioning. Every day your brain is listening. It is watching what you tolerate, what you repeat, and what you decide. Speak to it with clarity. Train it with discipline. Lead it with certainty. From this moment forward, choose to be intentional. Choose progress over comfort. Choose growth over fear. And most importantly, choose to become the person your future requires, starting now. Because when you rewire your brain, you don't just change your results, you change your destiny. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your attention. Thank you for choosing growth. Thank you for choosing to listen, not just with your ears, but with your mind and heart. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here today. Take what you've learned, apply it daily, and watch how your life begins to shift. Stay focused, stay committed, and never forget, the power to change has always been within you. Thank you, and goodbye.